Continuing the discussion on the law, what should be the Christian's attitude to the law, to commands? Christianity is not a list of do's and don'ts, laws. And Paul is dealing with this challenge in Romans chapter 7. Let's look at verse 14. We know that the law is spiritual, but I am unspiritual, sold as a slave to sin. I do not understand what I do, for what I want to do, I do not. But what I hate, I do. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. As it is, it's no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me, that is, in my mind. Wow. And that's really a terrible thing to do. And I know that. Let's just repeat that. Verse 16. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. Verse 18. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me. That is, in my mind, my sinful nature. For I have the desire to do what is good, but I cannot carry it out. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do. This I keep on doing. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it is no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. Verse 21. So, I find this law at work. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being, I delight in God's law. But I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin at work within me. What a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from the body that is subject to death? Thanks be to God, who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord. So then, I myself, in my mind, I'm a slave to God's law. In my sinful nature, a slave to the law of sin. This is a very important discussion because I doubt there is any living person who hasn't had to think clearly about that struggle. That you know what is good to do, but you find yourself not doing it. And then it becomes a continuous struggle. So the right attitude to the law is first of all to understand yourself, your self-image. Who are you? The most dangerous thing is to think you are not who you are. For example, to think you are stronger than you are will be one thing that will lead you to sin. You know, I've seen young men thinking that they are so strong, they can even be near women who are half naked with dresses that are too low from above and too high from below. And they say, no, I'm okay myself. If they are biologically okay, the way God has created us, within no time they will discover themselves being aroused sexually. And it's not something they want. They are righteous, they are holy boys. And have counseled with young people, and they can tell you, I don't know what happened. We just saw ourselves in each other. And somebody ends up with HIV/AIDS. Another one ends up with pregnancy. but it was never intended. And I think the first thing is the person has not accepted themselves. They have not accepted that they are biologically okay. Therefore, and the body of a naked woman or half naked or partially dressed person will have a problem with them. That's exactly the solution that Joseph had. He knew himself. And that in his late teens, he knew he's no match for a beautiful Potiphar's wife who was mad with lust for this young, beautiful Hebrew boy. So instead of negotiating, he ran off. The lady took hold of the coat. He left it. He knew himself. The first solution to this problem is what Paul is describing: understanding yourself and accepting yourself. And so when you accept that that's an area of weakness, you have done a SWOT analysis on yourself, and it's an area of weakness, then you don't allow yourself, you don't expose yourself, you stay off that path. If you know you used to be a drunkard, you don't start going where they're having wines and alcohol. Keep off. And don't let people know that's not an area you can go to. Don't start saying, but it's a long time since I drank. I can deal with it. You will discover yourself God. So see yourself, understand yourself. You know that command is not a command you can keep. You have even failed before. The right attitude is to accept. Of course, in the process, you are accepting what verse 18 is saying. For I know that good itself does not dwell in me. That is, in my sinful nature. So you need to accept that you are, as holy as you look to others, you know yourself to know that you can very easily fall. Nothing good is in me. And then verse 24 is also saying, please understand what a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from the body that is subject to death? You are accepting that you certainly are desperately wicked, and that given a chance, you will fall into sin. Nothing good dwells in you. The trouble is, when you are a young believer, you don't know that. You are so excited about knowing God that you think nothing can happen. I can never fall in sin. But only a mature Christian knows that it is possible to fall. And that's what Paul is. A mature Christian and knows it is possible to fall. So, once you know it's possible to fall, then you can do something about preventing it from happening. And I think that's what the passage is teaching us. Accept who you really are, a weakling. Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 7, the married people are people who have admitted they are weak. Instead of pretending you can be single, instead of pretending you can be sexually immoral, he says, get married. Don't ban. Get married. Know yourself. And don't pretend you'll be single when that's not the direction that you really are capable of. So, accept who you are. What that means is that even when you see somebody else sinning, you easily forgive them. You easily want to help them. You easily love them. Because you say, there go I, if it were not the grace of God. And you'll find it very easy to accept people when you know yourself. I have not yet sexually, I've never slept with a girl who is not married to me, but I know I could. So when somebody else does that, you want to help them out. And one help is the one Paul is giving us. Accept yourself. Know you are not as strong as you think. Oh, maybe we can even sleep in the same room. Nothing will happen. You'll be surprised what happens. Mix your money with the church money. Soon enough, you discover that Part of the money that had been offered to God has now become your personal property. Once you know you can be financially tempted, make sure the money for public money or group's money never mixes with your money. You put it literally in a separate place. If people give in coins, keep it in coins. Don't even change it. Let it stay there until you take it to the bank. That is the way to handle this weakness that Paul is saying we all have. So that's the message that we are getting in verse 18. But verse 14 is introducing it. We know that the law is spiritual, but I'm unspiritual, sold as a slave to sin. In other words, me, the Christian, I agree I'm unspiritual. That I'm sold, I'm actually a slave to sin. It's possible to fall in sin. So that's the self-image, the first place, how to handle the issues of the law and sin. Have a proper self-image, self-assessment, and act on the basis of that understanding. Then number 2, look at the law and don't complain about the law. Accept that it is good. That's what 16 is saying. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. In other words, the fact that you disobey it, you don't change it. There are people who start accommodating, our young people, you must understand them. Let's give them condoms. No, the fact that you agree that it is, that you can fall in sin, does not mean then you fall in sin or prepare to go in sin. You do the opposite. You try to do preventive things. Giving condoms is actually saying, I know you will fall. Just prepare. That is putting ideas in the mind that he must fall in sin. Not if they fall in sin. When they fall in sin, use these condoms. So, if you look at the law as good, then you'll be seeking to keep it. Even if you are struggling, you'll be seeking to keep it. Verse 16 is saying, and if I do what I do not want to do, I agree that the law is good. So, please agree the law is good. And you should long to obey the law. And you should dislike it when you fail. You need to be disciplined. A lot of people, even after they fall, they pretend, but who doesn't fall? We all fall. You need to come out clear. The law is good. Therefore, I'm the one wrong. Don't make it look like it's okay. Maybe there's a law. The law says you cannot marry a non-Christian. But you went ahead and married a non-Christian boy. Doesn't make it look like it's okay. Let it come clear. I am married to a non-Christian. It is wrong. Young people, don't copy me. Let the law remain good. Don't lower the standard because you fail yourself. Consider it as good. So, I don't know which area you are trying to make the law look more accommodative. No. The law is good. Keep it there. Let us struggle to keep to that law. And I think that will be very important. So, if you believe it is good, then you'll be happy in it. You'll delight. What verse 22 saying? Sorry. It says, for in my inner being, I delight in God's law. I'm happy that God said the law. All rules God has given in the scriptures are not meant for him. He doesn't gain out of them. They are done for our good. So I delight, I'm happy that God would give this advice, would give this instruction, would give this commandment. Is that the attitude you have to the law? That the law of God is not burdensome. It's not for his good. It's actually for my good. That is the right attitude. And Paul is saying, yes, I'm struggling, but I delight in myself. I really delight in the law of God. I'm happy that God has given the instruction. And that is something that will be very, very important for us. So think about, have the right self-image. Have also the right attitude to the law. But I think thirdly, you must also have the understanding of the flesh. This thing Paul is calling the flesh. In verse 15, he is saying, I do not understand what I do. For what I want to do, I do not do. But I hate what I hate, I do. And verse 19, he says something similar. For I do not do the good I want to do, but the evil I do not want to do, this I keep on doing. In other words, there's something different between me, the spiritual me, and my flesh. My flesh wants pleasure. My spirit wants to delight in God. And the two are fighting within the same person. I must understand this difference. Paul called it, I pommel my body. I fight it, I beat it, I pommel my body. So that after preaching to others, I myself may not be a castaway. And you need to understand that you have to discipline your body. You can't allow it to do what God has told you not to do. The flesh. This is the one that is born in sin after the fall of Adam, the indwelling sin. It continues to fight. Even after salvation, the flesh remains the flesh. Don't start imagining that although you got saved, that is your spirit. The flesh remains the flesh until you have to continue to fight it. It's not enough to will to do good in your own power, because your flesh will be interested in doing what it wants to do. So you'll discover it's a struggle. And if you are not careful, you end up doing what the flesh wants, which is not what the spirit in you wants. So you discover, I do sin, yet I don't want it. I didn't want to do it. So, and it has something to do with that point. Not understanding you and the flesh are not the same. And knowing that in the flesh itself, there's nothing good. If somebody else can fall, you can also fall. It is not that fight that makes the difference. Ever heard of tribes that have fighting dogs? There was this guy who had 2 dogs. And on the day of the fighting, he actually was offering both dogs. So people asking, hey, which of your dog will win? I said, I know. So say, you mean you can tell which dog will win? Yes. How do you know? I normally feed the red dog more than the black one. And I know if they go into the field, the kind of feeding I've done for the red one, it will certainly win. Similarly, it depends on whether you are feeding your spirit or feeding your flesh. If you feed your flesh, when the two come into collision, you will discover the flesh is the one that will carry the day. And that's something you need to understand. That the flesh is different, and that control is not easy. Just look at verse 16 again. And if I do what I do not want to do, I agree with the law is good. So you discover yourself. I'm not in control. And verse 17 is saying, as it is, it's no longer I myself who do it, but it is sin living in me. In other words, the flesh is different from me. We are two and inside the same person. And verse 20 retains the same. Now, if I do what I do not want to do, it's no longer I who do it, but it is sin living in me that does it. So Paul wants you to understand that dichotomy of two people in one. That there is a flesh that seeks to control. The flesh means the sinful nature can actually lead you, but you need to be rescued. You need to be rescued. In other words, there's a rescue plan that can help you to ensure that the spirit always wins over the flesh. You know, the philosophy behind sin is something in my mind, the law of my mind. That delights in God's law. That is inside me. Then there is the other one, that is the law of sin. That is in my flesh, in my members. And it hates the law of God. Let's just look at verse 23, verse 21 to 23 again. So I find this law at work. Although I want to do good, evil is right there with me. For in my inner being, I delight in God's law. But I see another law at work in me, waging war against the law of my mind and making me a prisoner of the law of sin that is at work within me. So, those are the two, the philosophy behind sin is which of them will win. The me in my inmost being, I want to please God. That's what sometimes the Paul is calling it, the law of my mind. In me is a desire to do good. But I forget that I live within a body. One day I'll die, and that will be a day of victory, because then my spirit will be released to go back to the Father and forevermore be in victory. But until the day of death comes, I live within my body, and my body has another rule, the law of sin, where it wants its members to do things that don't please God. And I think that's something you need to be aware of and understand it. What is the solution to this struggle of the two inside one body? We have said you must have the right self-image. We must say you must also have the right attitude to the law. Know the law is good. Don't have a hatred for the law. We have also said you must understand the flesh, what this nature is, the flesh, and the philosophy behind it that causes one to sin. But what's the real solution to it? I think always admit your helplessness. Verse 24, what a wretched man I am. Who will rescue me from the body that is subject to death? So the first thing is to admit your helplessness. And then, once you admit your helplessness, it will cause you never to trust yourself. You know, pride comes before a fall also means that when you trust yourself rather than trusting God, you could very easily be brought down by the devil. So the first thing is accept your helplessness. Number two, thank God that He has promised to give us help. Isn't that what He saying in verse 25? He is saying, thanks be to God who delivers me through Jesus Christ our Lord. That means when you totally surrender yourself to Jesus Christ, He will give you the ability to overcome the evil desires. Thank God for the help. Recognize that the help is available. So first of all, accept your helplessness, then recognize God's help is available. The two cries must be said together until heaven comes. In other words, oh, how helpless I am. Oh, but thanks be to God. Those are two things that will be with you. Every time you feel helpless, but you know there's God who will help me. I'm subjecting myself to God. Cry to Him, and you'll see Him help you one crisis, sin crisis after another. So let that continue. But at death, you will no longer just be given power from sin, you'll also be given freedom from sin. so that you will not be tempted again. You will not be temptable. Because the body, the devil uses the body, the flesh. You know, the choice of whether the inner man, the spirit, or the flesh will win is always determined by you. That's why you spend time talking to God, crying to God, reading His Word. So then, I myself, in my mind, am a slave to God's law, but in my sinful nature, a slave to the law of sin. Also, the conclusion in verse 25 is then agree to become a slave to God. In other words, when you become a slave means you do whatever God chooses that you do. That's what it means to be a slave to God. And don't live your life to please yourself. Slaves have no life of their own. They just live to honor the owner, to respect the owner, to serve the owner. So similarly, if you want this struggle between sin and righteousness to be sorted out in your life, you must come to where you are clear you are the slave of Jesus Christ and you want to live your life not to please self. Self is the enemy of the righteous life, but to honor God. But a good thing is that he says in Psalm 37, when you live that kind of life that seeks to delight in God, He Himself will sort you out. He will meet the desires of your heart. He will do what you need done. But if you concentrate on it, if you concentrate in pleasing yourself, you will end up sinning, because your desires, your natural desires, will take you away from worshiping or honoring God. So then, I myself, in my mind, in my spirit, I'm a slave to God, Lord. I've taken myself willingly, given myself to God's control. I don't struggle with Him. I don't dislike what He has said. If I fall in sin, I am sorry. I admit it. I do not try to cover it up because I know I want to please Him. That's really what you are talking about. Why am I going to do that? Because I know the choice is between being a slave of sin or being a slave of the Lord Jesus Christ. Because in my nature, my flesh, my sinful nature is a slave to the law of sin. And that's something that you have to think about and ask yourself, do you want to continue to be a slave? So that's the attitude you are supposed to have to the commandments of God, to the law of God. And that positive attitude will give you victory, especially as you learn how helpless you are, and then at the same time that there is hope in God. You know, the moment you think, oh, it's hopeless, all of us are sinners. No, it is true we are sinners, but the Lord has offered help. And it means that if you fall in sin, you don't say, it's okay, after all, I'm human. No, you know you have done wrong. You know you did not seek God's help. And you know the reason you are where you are is because you thought you can fight on your own. So you tell God, I'm sorry, and you go back to Him. So that's really what Paul is teaching us. A desire to honor God, but also a desire to admit that in our own strength, we can't do much. That's why even when you talk about serving the Lord, you have to ask yourself, can you really serve the Lord? Do you understand your limitations? Do you understand how weak you are? But the Lord Himself can work through me, but I may not be able to serve Him in certain areas. So I am relying on God. So anything He asks me to do, I know in my own power I cannot achieve it. So I seek His help. And the testimony is He actually does come and make you win. Even where you thought you'd fail, He comes and makes you win. Then you know He is the one in control for his glory.